Alright everyone, welcome to the last portion of the Maya fish tutorial. In this portion we're just gonna do a quick render using the Playblast. We're not using a full rendering technique just because I just want like a simple render for this assignment. At this point you should all kind of be here where your fish has some kind of animation, whether it's just tail wagging or some kind of motion. And then we're gonna add some components to make it look a little bit nicer and render something out. First thing we're gonna do is we're gonna create a render cam so we can actually render out to a specific camera. And to do that, you're gonna go to Create, Cameras, Render or Camera. It's gonna be called Camera 1. You're gonna rename it to Render Cam. Alright. And then we're gonna go to Panels, Perspective, and we're gonna do Render Cam. That way we look through the render cam in this panel. And in this panel you basically can just move around and select how you want to place the camera and give some control here. Same as perspective, you just kind of move it around until you find a good angle you like. If you're in the attribute editor, you can change your your camera's setup. So it's kind of like a DSLR or like a video camera. So you have your focal length, basically your lens. So you have a 35mm lens is the standard. You can do a 50mm, 28mm. The smaller this number, the wider it is. But 35 is the standard. You can leave it there if you like. Just giving you some options. You can also change some of the aperture and all the different settings, but in this case we're not going to mess with that. Alright, so back to the fish. I'm going to use this angle here. You can kind of find one that works for your animation that you have. For me, I just kind of want the fish to swim past the camera. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so it can swim out. One more. I'm going to move over here, actually. Alright, so the fish is just going to swim right to the camera. Alright. I'm going to select the render cam. This is the angle that I like, and you can see down here which camera you're using, render cam. And once I find an angle that I like, I'm going to select all the components in the channel box and of the render cam, right click and do lock, and you see this kind of like gray area pop up. And what it does is it doesn't let you move your camera around. So now if you wanted to tilt and move around, you wouldn't be able to. So we're going to move back to the perspective cam so we can keep working on stuff. You can see the camera cannot be moved. You can also do a side-by-side if you wanted to see what it looks like, and then on the panel here select the render cam. It's a little skewed because of the shape of the box here. You could do resolution gate, and that'll give you like about the right dimensions. And you can kind of see the angle. How it works. Pretty good. So next up, we want to kind of embellish this a little bit, make it look a little bit nicer. From Google, I just downloaded some images of like a underwater environment. So to add that, we're going to go back to our four-sided view here, and under one of these, front Z or something, go to View, Image Plane, Import Image, and I'm going to use this one here. I'm going to hit Open, and you can see it got imported right there. And I'm going to move it behind the fish here and scale it way up. If you go to side-by-side view, panels, render cam, you can kind of see the angle. And as you can see, the angle of the image is not really compatible with the image that I have, the shot. So I'm going to move it around a bit and kind of give it a better shape. It looks pretty good there for me. It's a little angled. So I'm going to, yeah, that looks good. Click off, and you won't see the animation there because you're hovering over here. If you click here, click off, you'll see the animation there. You could also render this with a blank background, just like a PNG sequence or something, and then After Effects add an animated background. But again, for this assignment, we want to keep it really simple, so we're just going to render a flat image and just make it slightly better. We're going to go to the full size view here. Next thing we want to do is we want to put a drop shadow on the fish, because typically light comes from the top here, from the sun and underwater. So we're going to give it a little bit of realism. And so we want the sun to come down and then drop shadow on the ground here. And then we want the fish to have pretty good lighting overall, get a little bit of bounce lighting. If you're really rendering this, you can create like light bounces and things like that. Since we're not doing that, we're going to have to like cheat it a little bit. So in order to do that, we're going to drop a plane and scale it way up. Tilt it to make it flat with the polygon side up, the black side down, and we're going to scale that way up. And what's going to happen is if you go to your the camera here, it's going to be over the fish. We want to move it under the fish a bit, right about there. And instead of assigning a material to it like a regular material, what we're going to do is we're going to assign a background material. So with the plane selected, you right click, assign favorite material, and you do use background. And that kind of fills in the gaps. And what's cool is that it in the camera, it'll look like that. This won't work on an Arnold render or anything like that. So, but once we add the proper lighting, I hid the grid by hitting the grid button here, just to get a better look. And what happens is if I create a light now, so create lights, I'm going to do a directional light because the sun comes from above. And scale it up so we can see it. Panel, perspective. Let's try that one more time. Create lights, directional light. Okay. It's hard to see the direction right now, and the lights aren't necessarily on, so we're going to turn them on by hitting this light button here. And you can kind of see where the light is. Boy, that's... Oh, that's why. Yeah. So show, nerves, curves, show, lights. Your project might look like this. I hid them earlier, but if you have your nerves, curves, or anything like that, you can hide those so they don't appear in the Playblast after you're animating. So show, nerves, curves, I hid those. And then the lights come up like this. This plane here, I'm going to create another layer with it so I can lock it and not mess with it. Now I can't mess with that plane. So you can see the direction of the lights. It's kind of facing the fish. We don't want that. We want lights from above. Pretty direct lighting. But as you see, it creates this like really dark shadow under it. So we're going to fill some of that in. And then we also want to turn on shadows so we can see them on the plane. And that's why we created the plane here, so we can catch shadows but not depict the gray part of it, and it could use the background. So when you look through the render cam, you can see the shadow there. And again, it's not perfect, but it's good enough for this assignment. Alright, perspective. So once you have that one light in, the next one that we're going to put in is going to be a ambient light. And the reason is we don't really want shadows to be cast with this one. We just kind of want to control the lighting a little bit and balance out that dark underside. And the ambient light is just going to light everything a specific color. If you go to the attribute editor, Control A, you can see the intensity is 1. We want like a tenth of that, so 0.1. And as you see, the hard shadow, I'm going to hide it here. So the dark shadow goes away. It lines the bottom shadow up a bit, but that's okay. I just want to clear out that light, so it's not such a harsh shadow. I still want a little bit of a shadow there, but not too much. I can also bring this guy up a little bit, so 1.3. So it's it's a little bit more pronounced. That's the directional light to get more power from above. So the render cam, that's what it looks like. You hit play. So with that, we're almost ready. The last thing we need to do in the editor here is turn on screen space ambient occlusion and also multi-sample anti-aliasing, and that's going to smooth out your fish a little bit. Whatever edges it's hard to tell, but it just makes all the edges a little bit nicer. Great. So once you've done that, we're gonna save our project, which is really important, and we're gonna go to the render settings. We're also gonna hide these lights. So under show lights, we're gonna hide those. Alright, so render settings, we want to set those up before, even though we're not actually rendering, we want to set up the render settings so we can tell the Playblast some of the things that we want. So it's going to be this option right here, display render settings, and you're going to get this up. It's going to give you automatically the Arnold render or one of the other options if you used it before. We're not really going to mess with them, we're just going to tell it what to do. So we're going to skip the file output because we're not going to actually output any files from here, or the frames. The renderable camera, that's one thing we're going to pick. So it's going to give you all the different cameras that you have and the perspective views. We're going to do the render cam, the one we created. That way no other camera's going to come out of it. Again, if you want to output with a blank background so you can composite something in the background, you can do the alpha channel mask, turn that on. The next option, you're probably going to get something different in the presets here, but set it to HD 1080. That's going to be 1920 by 1080p. It's pretty standard. If you have a slower computer, you can do 720. Maintain height and width ratio in pixels. Make sure it says 1920 by 1080 here. 72 resolution, and that's it. Once you have everything set there, you're going to go to panels, just so you can watch it while it does. Render cam, and you're going to turn off these film gates, just so they don't appear in the other one. And to Playblast, you're going to right click on the timeline here, and you're going to look for Playblast, and it's the last option here. And instead of just hitting Playblast, you're going to hit the option menu. I'm going to reset this. So standard, this is what you get. So you go view and show ornaments. Ornaments are parts of Maya that you've enabled, such as the XYZ guide here. If you have like a poly count or something, it'll show you if you show ornaments. So we're going to turn that off. We don't have any of the options. For format, we're going to do AVI. AVI is not compressed, so it's going to be a really big file, but we're going to fix that later. If you're using a Windows computer, you're going to have a few encoding options. I would say none for now, just because some of these don't work well with Mac and back and forth. We're going to fix the encoding later anyway. So hit none. And your quality, we want 100% quality because we want all the detail. And the display size, instead from window, we're going to do from render settings. And what that's going to do is going to get the camera. So whatever we set in the render settings, the 1920 by 1080, that's what's the resolution it's going to come out of. And your scale, instead of 50, we want to do 100. That way we get a full scale. You can leave frame padding as is and remove temporary files. We want to click here where it says save to file, and we're going to hit browse and double check that it's going to our movies folder. If it's going somewhere else, put it in your project folder, movies. And you're going to name it here. So fish tutorial Playblast. And this Playblast is a pre-production tool. It's not necessarily a finalized animation render or anything like that, but it's good to visualize what's happening. And as long as you learn the skills in this part, we're moving on to the next in the future assignments. So the fish tutorial Playblast, save, and then you hit Playblast. You might see some weird stuff happening here. Don't worry too much about it. If you set everything up the right way, you should get a video. It might lag a bit because it's like a really huge file, but otherwise it should be good. Alrighty. So once you have that rendered out, I might have some crashing here. Fish tutorial and then movies. So fish tutorial Playblast. So here it is, the movie. The problem is it's a properties. It's a 563 megabyte file for like a 3-second animation. So that's not good. You can't really use that very many things. It's going to lag if you have an older computer. So what you want to do is that you want to open up Adobe Media Encoder. If you have Media Encoder, it's not free. It's part of the membership with Adobe, but you can also take this file, upload it to YouTube, and then download it again, and then you'll have a compressed version of it. But all you have to do is find the file, or you can drag and drop it in there. And once it's in here, it's automatically going to go to H.264. You can pick a bunch of different options, but this is one of the more standard versions of encoding today. Depending on the quality that you want, you can leave it at medium bit rate, or you can do like high bit rate or something. We can afford high bit rate here, so let's do high bit rate. It went from a 500 megabyte file down to a 1 megabyte on medium and 4 megabyte on high bit rate. So let's get all that quality. See what happens here. Yeah, stays so far. All right. So okay, and then it should stay in the same location. It's just going to be called .mp4 instead of the .avi that it was before. So once you hit play here, it should take just a few seconds. It might take a little longer on your computer, but it created the file. So when you go see the file, you have Fish Tutorial, Playblast, MP4. And visually, there shouldn't be any difference between this file and repeat. I'm getting some jumping here, but might just be, yeah, it's just the loading. There shouldn't be any difference between this file and the other file. It's just a lot smaller. And with that, you just have to submit that and that MP4 file, and you're done.